जय श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधार श्रीवासादि गौर भक्त वृंदा. हरे कृष्णा 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 हरे हरे, हरे राम 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 हरे हरे. Hare Krishna. Thank you all for joining, and we are discussing verse number 21 and 22 of chapter number 1 of Srimad Bhagavad Gita. And in this verse, Arjuna is going to speak for the first time. So before this, in the previous verse, we saw that Arjuna was getting ready to fight in the battlefield of Kurukshetra. And before the fighting, he looked at the Kuru army and he spoke to Lord Sri Krishna. So let's see what Arjuna is speaking to the Supreme Lord. So the Sanskrit is Arjuna Vacha Senayor Ubayor Madhye Ratham Stapaya Me Achyuta Yavadetan Nirikshayaham Yodhu Kaman Avastitan Kairmaya Saha Yodhyavyam Asmin Rana Samudyame. So here we see that there are 6 lines, and previous verse there were also 6 lines. So normally the verses have the verses will have like 4 lines. So sometimes these verses are split differently depending upon the continuity of the thought. So we'll see that sometimes in different BG verses number may be different. So here 6 lines for the 2 lines which was actually covered for the previous verse, because previous verse also had like 6 lines. Or sometimes it may happen that the next verse or the following verses will have 2 lines. So depending on the continuity of the thoughts, these verses are grouped together. So let's read the translation. So translation, Srila Prabhupada gives, Arjuna Vacha means Arjuna said, right? O infallible one. So who is he speaking to? He is speaking to the Supreme Lord Krishna, who is his charioteer. He is saying, O infallible one. He is calling the Lord as Achyuta. And is requesting the Lord that please draw my chariot between the 2 armies, so that I may see those present here. So he wanted to see who is present in the battlefield of Kurukshetra. And he's wanted to see particularly the Kaurava army. And he want to see that who is present there from the Kaurava side, and who is desiring to fight. They who are desiring to fight with them, and with whom I must contend in this great trail of arms. So he wanted to see who has come to fight with him in the battlefield of Kurukshetra. So that's why you see in this picture, nicely drawn by some artist, where Arjuna is requesting Krishna to draw the chariot in the middle of the battlefield, and Krishna, without asking any question, generally the charioteer won't ask or argue with the person for whom is driving the chariot. So similarly, Krishna is following the instruction of Arjuna, and he is taking this chariot in the middle of the battlefield. So in the purport, let's see what Srila Prabhupada has to say. So in the first paragraph, Srila Prabhupada says or discusses about Lord's causeless mercy, or Krishna is sometimes known as Bhakta Vatsala. Bhakta Vatsala means he is very, very affectionate towards his devotees. So out of his causeless mercy, he engages in pastime with his devotees, and he is also very, very affectionate towards them, and he takes menial role. Like we see here, Krishna is taking a very menial role, like a role of a servant, and he is driving the chariot of a devotee, who is in this case Arjuna. So Prabhupada says, although Lord Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, right? And whenever we see when Krishna starts speaking, here it is Arjuna speaking, so it's Arjuna Vacha. But when Krishna starts speaking, it has been, Vyasadeva wrote it as Shri Bhagavan Avacha, means the Supreme Personality of Godhead is speaking. So Prabhupada says, although Lord Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, out of his causeless mercy, he was engaged in the service of his friend. So he's serving his friend here, and that is his causeless mercy. And then the term which is used for Krishna, or the name Arjuna is using for Krishna over here, is Achyuta. He is calling Krishna by different names. He's sometimes calling Madhava, right? So we saw that he is being called by the name Madhava earlier. Here he has been called by the name Achyuta. So Achyuta means infallible. He never fails in his affection for his devotees, and he is very committed in that relationship. He never fails, and thus he is addressed here as infallible. So that's why infallible, and depending on the situations, we may become fallible, but in Krishna's case it's not like that. He is always infallible. He always loves his devotees. And then Prabhupada describes that Krishna is acting as per the role. So right now he has taken the role of a charioteer, and the role of a charioteer is to hear whatever the master tells you, you do accordingly. Basically, charioteer is a driver. So whatever is the master telling the driver, whatever action needs to be done, then the driver has to follow. So similarly, Krishna is also performing that role of a chariot driver. So as a charioteer, he had to carry out the orders of Arjuna. And since he did not hesitate to do so, he is addressed as infallible. So this is another reason of calling him as infallible. He is just following the instruction of his master, which is in Arjuna in this case. So he is acting according to whatever role he has taken in the battlefield of Kurukshetra. Now Prabhupada says the Lord is supreme in all positions. So though he has taken the role of a charioteer, he is still the Supreme Lord. So although he had accepted the position of a charioteer for his devotees, his supreme position was not challenged. He remains as the Supreme Personality of Godhead under any circumstances or under any role. Though the Lord may be like a 7-day-old child, or a 25-year-old man, or a 16-year-old boy, in all those circumstances, his supreme position is not challenged. In all circumstances, he is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Rishikesha, the Lord of the total senses. So he is the controller of the senses, as this word Rishikesha was discussed earlier session. So he controls our senses, and he is going to control the senses of Arjuna and help him to win this battle. So the next paragraph is about relationships between Lord and his devotees. So Lord can have different kind of relationship with his devotees, and this point we discussed in the introduction, right? That there are different rasas in which Lord actually have pastimes with the devotees. So those rasas are Santa, Dasya, then Vatsalya, Sakhya, and then Madhurya. So these are the 5 different rasas, or Mukhya rasa, and then there are Gauna rasas also. So in this paragraph, Prabhupada says the relation between the Lord and his servitor is very sweet and transcendental. So these relationships are not like mundane relationship. This relationship is out of pure love. And in pure love, what happens is described here in this purport. That in pure love, the servitor is always ready to render service to the Lord. So when we have relationship with the Lord, we always look forward to serve the Lord. And similarly, what happens? The Lord reciprocates. The Lord is always seeking an opportunity to render some service to the devotees. So there is a competition between the Lord and the devotees. They each want to serve each other, or each want to serve the other. He takes greater pleasure in his pure devotees assuming the advantageous position of ordering him than he does in being the giver of the orders. So normally the Supreme Lord's position is supreme. So the normal circumstances would be, or the expected circumstances would be, he would like to give order. But that is not the case of the Lord. He actually likes to take order from from his devotees. In fact, when it is described that when Arjuna was Lord Krishna was driving the chariot and Arjuna was in the chariot, so there was a lot of noise in the battlefield because so many warriors are fighting against each other, and then there are so many weapons. So there was so much noise and chaos all over. So if Arjuna wants Krishna to go to the left side, he would actually kick Krishna on his left side. Or if he wants to go to the right side, sometimes he would kick Krishna too, because otherwise Krishna doesn't know in that where to go, or where Arjuna wants to head the chariot towards, right direction or left. So this is how Krishna took such a lower position where his master is actually kicking him, though he is the Lord. So he is taking order in that way. Since he is the master, everyone is under his orders and no one is above him to order him. But when he finds that a pure devotee is ordering him, he obtains transcendental pleasure, although he is the infallible master in all circumstances. So though he is a master, he loves getting orders from his devotee and carrying out those orders. So this is how the Lord is. This is so loving. That's why he's called as Bhaktavatsala. He is always ready to serve his devotee under any circumstances. So in this particular instance, what is happening is, what is Arjuna's desire? Arjuna is a pure devotee of the Lord. Arjuna had no desire to fight with his cousins and brothers. Right? So he didn't have any desire to fight. But what happened is the Kauravas actually forced him. But he was forced to come into the battlefield by the obstinacy of Duryodhana, who was never agreeable to any peace negotiations. So in Mahabharata we see that the Pandavas, they didn't want fight and unnecessary kill people for getting the kingdom. Right? So they send the messengers one by one, to make negotiation and get their kingdom back, after the exile term was over. But the Kauravas, they didn't agree with that. So finally, actually, Krishna goes as a peace messenger. And even Bhima tells Krishna that please make sure that the war doesn't happen. Right? And when Krishna goes there and he requests to give back their kingdom, and they rejected that idea. So then Krishna said, okay, in behalf of the Pandavas, I am just asking for 5 villages, nothing more. If you give just 5 villages to rule, and he gives the name of those villages, which villages the Pandavas will rule, then the war won't happen. I promise you that. But, Duryodhana won't give an inch of a land. So this is how we see that, the obstinacy of Duryodhana actually forced the Pandavas to come to the battlefield. And before the battle happened, Arjuna knows who were the people on the other side. So before the war, the alliances were formed and the both party had their own spies, and they could know that which side or which king is actually going to come and fight from the other side. So then actually what exactly Arjuna wants to see here. So this is discussed here in the last paragraph, where Arjuna is requesting Lord to draw the chariot in the middle of the battlefield. So therefore, Prabhupada says that therefore he was very anxious to see who the leading persons present in the battlefield were. Although there was no question of peacemaking endeavor on the battlefield. Already the conch shell were blown, so there was no question of peacemaking or anything. But he wanted to see them again, and he wanted to also see how much they were bent upon demanding this unwanted war. Right? He wanted to see that how how much they are, ready to kill, and fight for adharma actually, because this was an activity of adharma, and then they were not at all ready to make any kind of peace. So who are these people, and how can someone be so anxious to actually follow adharma? So this was going to be a very difficult war, and Arjuna's actually wanted to see that what is their disposition, the disposition of the Kuru army, So this is pretty much discussed in this verse, and we will continue our discussion further. What Arjuna is going to say to Krishna regarding what he is seeing, because he has asked Krishna to bring the chariot in the middle of the battlefield, and he wants to see. So what he is seeing, and then what he is going to present in details, his doubts and lamentations. So that will be all the things that are going to come in the future verses. So we'll stop here and we'll continue our discussion in the next session. Thank you so much. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Srimad Bhagavad Gita ki jai. Gaur Premanande Haribol.